Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start out today with a little bit of a story. So, this comes from the Jataka Tales, where supposedly the Buddha went through many different rebirths before he was born as a human, and then eventually attained enlightenment, and then went into nirvana. So there's these stories told about the incredible kinds of lives that he had before, and very often he was born as an incredible animal. So in this particular one, the Buddha was born as a deer. And he wasn't any kind of like normal deer, but a very incredible deer. So imagine a deer. Everyone has a deer in their head, right? Can you imagine a deer? Okay, now it has golden fur. Its eyes are blue as sapphires, and even its horns and hooves shone with the luster of precious stones. So can you imagine that? It's kind of incredible, magical deer. All right. So the Buddha, being very insightful, being very wise, understood that this appearance that he had would make him very desirable for hunters that would want to capture or kill him and kind of hang this incredible deer hide on their wall. So he made sure that he was never in any kind of populated area, always in the thickest forest, very difficult to find. But one day, while this deer was roaming around, it heard the cries of someone who was struggling. And they happened to be near a river, at which point they saw that a man was being caught in the strong rapids of this river. So the Buddha said, "Do not fear, I will save you." And sure enough, the Buddha jumped into the water and acted as a, I don't know, I guess a log or something, but stopped the water so that the person could grab onto him and he could jump out and save this person. So, of course, carrying this man out of safety, he was very grateful, and he asked, "What could I possibly do to repay you for your kindness? No one has ever done anything nice like that for me, not even my close friends or family." So the Buddha said to him, "All I ask is you do not tell other humans about me. If men knew of my existence, they would come and hunt me." So this man promised to keep it secret, and he bowed and began to go back onto his way home. Now, at that time, in this country, there was a queendom. So, this is my story. I'm telling it, so I'll tell how I want to. So, there was these two queens, and they lived together, and one of these queens had this ability. She had dreams, and no matter how spectacular, incredible, or ridiculous their dreams were, they would always inevitably end up coming true. So now, the other queen, over time, realized to take heed of what she would tell her. She understood that eventually these dreams would come true, so she would always listen to her when she talked. So the queen with the magical dream said that she had this extraordinary dream, that she dreamed of this brilliant golden deer that sparkled like jewels. And this deer stood on the throne, surrounded by the royal family, and preached in a human voice. Now, this would sound ridiculous pretty much to anyone, but because she understood that all of these dreams would come true, her partner decided to go out and find this deer. So now, roaming the lands, they had a very difficult time trying to find the deer on her own. So she made a proclamation that anyone who could bring this deer to the queens would receive a rich village and an incredible payment. Now, the man who had been rescued heard that proclamation and now became very conflicted. He was, of course, very grateful still to the deer, but he was also very, very poor. And imagining himself struggling throughout his entire life, he now saw a way to get out of that. So he decided that he was going to break this promise to the deer. So he continued to his journey. He went back past his house and went to the queendom. And he went up to the queens and offered them to take them to the deer. So the queen was delighted. She gathered up a large body of soldiers and then went out to find this deer. He guided them to the river that he was caught into, up the stream, and eventually they were able to find it. So the man raised up his hand to point at the deer, and I'm not sure why this is in the story, but as soon as he lifted his hand up, it was lopped off, like it was cut off by a sword. So that's Just so you know, that's in there. I don't know why. So after that happens, the queen sees the deer, which sparkles like the sun, and desires to have this incredible creature. So she pulls back her arrow and her bow. Now, realizing that he was surrounded by his hunters, the deer, instead of trying to run, approaches the queen and addresses her in this human voice. So she tells him, he tells her, stop, mighty queen, please explain how you found me here. So the queen, astonished, puts down her bow and points to this man that the Buddha had rescued. And so the deer then says, truly, it is better to take a log out of a flood than to save an ungrateful person from it. So now the queen, hearing these words, is like, this sounds like you're talking about someone else. I have no idea what it is, but it sounds like you're very upset with someone. So the Buddha explained that I'm not trying to blame anyone. I just speak this sharply to a wrongdoer to prevent him from doing wrong again, just as a physician might apply a harsh remedy to cure his own son. I speak harshly because I rescued this man from danger, and now he brings danger to me. So the queen turns to this man and asks, is this true? And the man, now filled with remorse, looks down at the ground and whispers, yes. So his queen grows angry and pulls her arrow back, now at the man, and is ready to shoot this man, when, again, the Buddha cries out and tells the queen to reconsider. Do not strike one who is already stricken. So this deer's compassion moves the queen, and she says, well said, holy queen. If you forgive him, so will I. And the queen promised to give this man the riches that he was promised. Now, finally, the golden deer was brought to the capital, where the queen invited the royal family to come around to listen to this deer preach the Dharma. And of course, this came to fulfill the realization of the dream that the other queen had. Now, the deer preached this. I believe all the moral laws can be summed in this way: compassion to all creatures. The practice of compassion to all creatures should cause humans to regard all creatures as their own families. If a person regards all creatures as his own family, how can he think of harming them? For this reason, the sages know that the whole of righteousness is contained in compassion. Great Queen, keep this in mind and practice compassion to your people, as if they were your sons and daughters, and your reign will be glorified. So of course, the queen praised the words of this deer. He and his people took up this practice of compassion, and they did it with whole hearts. The golden deer disappeared back into the forest, but the birds and the animals enjoyed safety and peace in the kingdom to this day. So, did you like that? Maybe, no? All right, well, if you didn't like that, too bad. I picked that story because I felt like it really got to the heart of the practice that we do here, which is, of course, saying the benefits of saying Nam Mô Buddha. So we said that a lot over the time. And how many of you really understand what that means? Okay, good, nobody. So I'll start you off with a little bit. We have, within our sect of Buddhism, 3 sutras that we really focus on. So they are the larger sutra on the Buddha of Dimensional Life, right? Does it sound familiar? What's the other one? The smaller one, right? And then finally, which one? Lotus? No. Good try. Lotus one is also a good one. It's the sutra on the contemplation of the Buddha of Dimensional Life. So we actually have up here the 3 sutras. So they're in this scroll form. And so the first one is so big that it takes up 2 scrolls, which is why there's 4 of them. And then the other 2. So the large sutra, a portion of it is what we chant today, which you say again. So that's what we're chanting. It comes from these sutras. I'll probably get into this deeper in other talks, but for now, we'll say it comes from these bodhisattva vows, and this one in particular. So this vow goes like this. It comes from the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, who eventually become Amida Buddha, which is up there in the middle. So Bodhisattva said, if, when I attain Buddhahood, sentient beings in the lands of the 10 quarters, who sincerely and joyfully entrust themselves to me, desire to be born in my land and call my name, even 10 times, should not be born there, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. Excluded, however, are those who commit the 5 grievous offenses and abuse the right Dharma. We read it again, or better? I'll read it again. If, when I attain Buddhahood, sentient beings in the lands of the 10 quarters, who sincerely and joyfully entrust themselves to me, desire to be born in my land and call my name, even 10 times, should not be born there, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. Excluded, however, are those who commit the 5 greatest offenses and abuse the right Dharma. So, when we call the name of Amida, that would be our saying the Menden's. So we say, Namo Amida Butsu, which translates into, I take refuge in Amida Buddha. Now this is the calling the name part. It's up to us to have this entrusting and desiring to be born part, which is Shinjin, which we talked about last week, which, again, I could probably talk for much longer on. But what I wanted to get to the heart of is that this idea that we're calling the Buddha's name. Now the reason why we're doing this is because, not of anything that we're doing, but it comes from Amida Buddha's side. Amida Buddha made this vow, made this wish, because Amida Buddha wanted all beings to be free of suffering. This is the heart of true compassion, of deep compassion, just like the deer in the story. He was teaching that compassion is the heart of all of the teachings. It's the heart of all moral decisions, is that to have compassion in your heart is to do the right thing. That is what the Dharma is all about, that is what Buddhism is all about, that is what the teaching is constantly trying to awaken us to. And so the way that we awaken to this is by saying the name of the Buddha. So this might seem a little bit kind of fuzzy, doesn't really make sense what the connection is here. But when we say the name of the Buddha, we are also trying to be living within the heart of this wish, to end the suffering of all beings. And so hopefully, when we say it, we have that kind of mentality, and we try to open up our own hearts to try to have that same kind of compassion, to try to lessen the suffering of all beings. Also, one of the funny things in the story was that they said that it's better to save a log than to save an ungrateful person out of a river. And so then the queen was going to kill the guy, right? But then the Buddha was like, no, I just said that because I was trying to be mean so that he wouldn't do it again. So the same thing with this vow, is that this last part, excluded are those who commit the 5 grievous offenses. We're taught that Amida Buddha doesn't exclude anyone, that everyone is accepted into the vow. So how could they have this exclusion clause at the very end? And so this is kind of where it comes in, is that it's in there to stop people from doing bad things. Because even though you do bad things, you're still accepted, but try to do it, please. So that's where that comes into. So hopefully this helped everyone to understand a little bit into the reason why we have the practice of saying Namo Amida Butsu, why we say it so much, and to try to keep that in mind when we do say it. So when you say it, of course, we do it a lot in the temple, but when you're in your everyday lives, you can also say it. And you don't have to say it out loud. You don't even have to think the words. But when you have that heart of compassion, when you try to lessen suffering of other beings, that's when you're really saying that. So if you could please all join me in Gasha. Namo Amida Butsu.